It had been years since anyone had even considered asking for my advice, let alone regarding money. Growing up, I was always told I'd never make it, never be rich, never achieve anything of substance. My family had their doubts, and I let them think whatever they wanted. I was used to the words, "You're not cut out for this," or "Money isn't for people like us." They didn't believe in me, and I didn't mind. Or at least, I thought I didn't. The truth is, I was used to proving people wrong. It had become second nature, like breathing. So, when I walked into the family reunion last Saturday, the chatter in the air was different. It was no longer filled with skeptical comments or those backhanded good luck messages. No, now they were talking about stocks, investments, and of all things, financial strategies. I barely recognized the voices of my own family. Then, my older brother Frank caught my eye from across the room. He had that hesitant look on his face, the one he always had when he was about to ask for a favor. I saw him whisper something to my aunt, who nodded, and then all of a sudden, they were both making their way toward me. My heart dropped in my chest. I knew exactly what this was about, and I could already feel the resentment building. "Victoria," Frank began, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "You've been doing really well with your investments lately, right?" I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I'd never been openly asked for financial advice. Never. It wasn't that I was upset at the idea, but there was something in the air, a shift, a realization that I'd never thought would come. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound casual, though I felt anything but. "I've been managing some things here and there." Aunt Judy, who had always been skeptical of my get-rich-quick schemes in the past, leaned in. "So, we were wondering," she hesitated, looking at Frank for reassurance before turning back to me. "Could you help us out? Teach us how you did it? We've been struggling a bit with our finances lately. It's just been tough, you know?" I felt my stomach twist. The same people who had doubted me, who had thought I was naive or foolish for thinking I could ever have a future beyond working at a 9-to-5 job, were now standing before me, asking for guidance. They wanted to know my secret. The same people who used to criticize my ambitions now wanted to be a part of my success. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. Instead, I looked down at my hands, clenched tightly around the glass of iced tea I'd been nursing. My mind flicked back to the days when I was younger, when I dreamed of proving them wrong. I thought back to the sleepless nights spent poring over finance books and articles, the countless hours I'd invested in learning about the stock market, about investments, about ways to make money work for me. They didn't know that I'd spent years building the foundation of this success from scratch, with nothing but my determination and a refusal to accept the limitations they had set for me. "Victoria," Frank's voice pulled me from my thoughts, and I looked up to see both of their faces waiting for an answer, the question lingering in the air. I had to say something. "I think," I started slowly, careful with every word. "Before I agree to help, I need to make something clear." They exchanged confused glances, but I pressed on. "This isn't going to be easy. It's not a quick fix. If you're asking me for advice, you're going to have to put in the work, just like I did. It's not about magic formulas or shortcuts. It's about the long game, the grind." Frank looked at Aunt Judy, who nodded, and then they both turned back to me, almost pleading. "We know," Frank said quickly, his voice tinged with a mixture of hope and desperation. "We're ready. We just don't know where to start, Victoria." I sighed, setting my glass down with a soft clink, realizing the gravity of the moment. They had no idea what they were asking for, but still I found myself agreeing. "All right," I said, feeling a strange mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. "I'll help you, but first, you need to understand one thing. You'll need to commit. This isn't just about learning how to invest. It's about learning how to change your mindset, and that takes time." Frank gave me a nervous smile. "We're ready for that too." As I looked into their hopeful faces, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry, not really, but I couldn't help but feel a little sense of irony. These were the same people who had once told me I'd never be rich. Now, they were asking me for financial advice. They wanted a piece of the life they had once dismissed as impossible for someone like me. But what struck me the most in that moment was how far I had come. From the girl who was told she'd never amount to anything, to now being the one with the answers. And as much as I had no obligation to share that success, a part of me knew this was bigger than them. It was about changing the narrative, about taking back control of the story I was always told I couldn't be a part of. I nodded slowly, standing up from the table, ready to begin the journey with them, even though it felt a little bittersweet. This was my opportunity to not just give advice, but to show them how far I had come. And maybe, just maybe, it would give me the final chance to show my family that the girl they once dismissed wasn't just going to make it. She was already there. The next few days felt surreal. I had agreed to help my family, but I still couldn't quite shake the feeling that I was walking into a battlefield. There was a part of me that wanted to prove my worth, to show them just how much I had learned and how far I had come. But there was another part of me, the part that had spent years fighting to be seen, to be taken seriously, reminding me that I didn't need their validation anymore. Still, the curiosity in their eyes, the hunger for knowledge, was impossible to ignore. So I set aside my doubts and got to work. We met at my apartment the following Saturday, a quiet, comfortable space that had become my sanctuary after years of hard work. The table was set with coffee and notebooks, and my family, including Frank and Aunt Judy, looked around nervously, like students entering their first class. Their uncertainty was palpable, but I had made it clear from the start. This was not going to be easy. It wasn't going to be a simple, here's how you get rich quick type of thing. It would take discipline, commitment, and most importantly, the willingness to change. I began with a question. What do you think it means to truly be financially successful? They sat back, exchanging confused glances. No one answered right away, which wasn't surprising. Most people see financial success as a number, a figure in a bank account, the size of the house, the car in the driveway. But I wasn't going to give them that easy answer. No one's ever going to hand you wealth, I continued. Success doesn't come from a windfall, a lottery ticket, or a lucky break. It comes from creating value, from understanding how money works, from building something that lasts. And if you don't understand that, you'll always be stuck, no matter how much money you make. Aunt Judy shifted in her chair, looking uneasy. But that's what we've always tried to do, Victoria. We've worked hard our whole lives. We've saved. We've tried. I nodded. I know you have. But the difference is in how you think about money. Money isn't a goal, it's a tool. You can either use it to build something, or you can let it control you. Most people, unfortunately, don't get that until it's too late. Frank looked thoughtful. So, you're saying it's more than just getting a better job or saving more? Exactly, I replied. Those things help, but they're not the solution. The solution is understanding that wealth isn't just about what you make. It's about what you keep and how you make it work for you. They were quiet for a moment, digesting this new perspective. Frank, ever the skeptic, furrowed his brow. All right, so what do we do with that? How do we actually start? I smiled. First things first, mindset. You need to stop seeing money as the end game. You have to start seeing it as the means to something bigger. For me, it was about freedom. The freedom to do what I wanted, when I wanted, without being chained to a 9-to-5. Once I understood that, everything else started falling into place. Aunt Judy looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. I just don't know if we're cut out for that. I mean, you were always different. You've always had that drive. I don't know if we have it in us. I could see the doubt in her eyes. I had seen that same doubt in myself many times before, but I wasn't about to let them off the hook. It's not about being special, Aunt Judy. It's about being willing to change your thinking. If you want different results, you have to do things differently. If you keep doing the same thing over and over, you're just going to keep getting the same thing. Frank leaned forward, his interest piqued. So, what's the first step? What should we do right now? I leaned back in my chair, considering my words carefully. I didn't want to overwhelm them, but I knew that this was their first real chance to understand the depth of what they were asking. The first thing you need to do is start with the basics, budgeting and saving. It sounds boring, but it's the foundation of everything. Before you start investing or thinking about passive income streams, you need to know where your money is going. You need to know your income, your expenses, and what you can afford to save. And you need to make that a habit. Budgeting, Aunt Judy muttered under her breath, clearly skeptical. That's where we always fall short. Then that's where we'll start, I said firmly. We're going to set a budget, and we're going to stick to it. We're going to track every penny, and every month we're going to make sure we're putting something away. You're going to start treating savings like an expense, not an afterthought. Frank looked at me, a hint of disbelief still in his eyes. You really think that's all it takes to start? I could hear the doubt, but I wasn't going to back down. It's where it all begins. You'll be surprised how much more control you'll feel once you start tracking and managing your money. And once you've mastered that, we'll move on to the next steps: investing, creating streams of income, and ultimately building real wealth. But it all starts with understanding where your money is going. There was silence for a moment, and then Aunt Judy nodded slowly. All right, I'll give it a try. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. Here they were, my family, finally ready to learn what I had been preaching all these years. But a part of me still felt guarded. They didn't know the sacrifices it had taken to get here. They didn't know how many times I had failed before I finally got it right. But I also knew that this was a new chapter for all of us. I wasn't just teaching them how to manage money. I was teaching them how to think differently about it, how to stop seeing it as an obstacle, and instead start seeing it as a tool. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about helping them. It was about showing myself that I had made it, that I had learned, and that my success was something I had built with my own 2 hands. I was finally in control of my own financial destiny, and now I was showing them how to take that first step. As the days passed, the excitement in my family's eyes began to fade, replaced with doubt and frustration. The first few days of budgeting had gone well, at least on paper. They'd tracked their expenses, categorized their spending, and began setting aside a small portion of their incomes for savings. It seemed promising, like we were heading in the right direction, but that didn't last long. Slowly, the cracks began to show. Frank was the first to break. He had always been the one with big dreams, the one who saw potential in every idea, no matter how risky. But when it came to the grind of saving and budgeting, it wasn't as glamorous as he had imagined. He had tried cutting down on eating out, but when the weekend rolled around, the temptation to splurge on drinks with friends was just too strong. I don't know, Vic, he admitted one evening, his voice tinged with frustration. I thought this would be easier. I mean, it's like I'm just moving money around all the time, and it doesn't feel like I'm getting anywhere. I could feel the frustration rising within him. The same frustration I had felt when I started this journey. The feeling of spinning your wheels, not seeing immediate returns, was enough to make anyone give up. You're not supposed to see it all at once, I reminded him gently, sitting down across from him at the kitchen table. It's about consistency. It's not about making a huge splash. It's about making small, sustainable changes. This is a marathon, not a sprint. But Frank wasn't convinced. I get it, but it just feels like all I'm doing is cutting things out. It doesn't feel like I'm actually getting anything. I could see the seeds of doubt taking root. The idea that wealth would come to him in a big, exciting moment was still stuck in his head. But I couldn't let him give up so easily. That's the mistake most people make, I said firmly. They think money is about what you can get right now, but that's not the way it works. The trick is to build habits that keep you moving forward, even when you don't see results immediately. If you keep focusing on what you don't have, you'll never get anywhere. Aunt Judy, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. But isn't this whole thing about saving and cutting back, well, a little depressing? We're doing all this work, but it doesn't feel like we're enjoying life. I could hear the underlying sadness in her voice. Aunt Judy had always been someone who believed in living for the moment. And now here she was, struggling to accept the new mindset I was trying to impart. I leaned forward, trying to strike the balance between understanding her perspective and staying firm on the principles I had learned. It's not about depriving yourself, Judy, I explained. It's about making your money work for you in a way that gives you more freedom in the long run. Trust me, when you don't have to worry about bills or living paycheck to paycheck, you'll have more freedom to enjoy life without the weight of financial stress. She looked down, chewing on her lip. I guess I just don't see how we get there. I could feel the resistance building in the room. The reality of changing their mindset was beginning to hit them. It wasn't enough to just set a budget. They had to change the way they saw money, and that was the hardest part of all. You have to trust the process, I said, trying to inject a bit of hope into the conversation. This isn't a quick fix. It's a lifestyle change. It's not about giving up everything you love. It's about making sure you have enough to enjoy the things that matter most. But we can't get there if you're constantly doubting the plan. Frank slouched in his chair, his frustration palpable. I get it. It's just, I've been working the same job for years, and I'm still barely scraping by. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. I understood exactly where he was coming from. That feeling of stagnation, of being stuck in a job you don't love, is one of the most disheartening parts of trying to build wealth. But I had to remind him of what I had learned the hard way. That stagnation wasn't the result of doing the work. It was about not being willing to change how you approached your goals. It's not about your job, I said quietly, my voice firm but understanding. It's about the way you manage your money outside of work. You don't need to rely solely on your job to build wealth. You have to start looking at other income streams, investing, side hustles, building something that works for you while you sleep. If you only depend on your 9-to-5 job, you'll always be stuck. I could see that this idea was foreign to him. The notion of generating wealth without working for it all day long was something Frank had never considered. You really think that's possible? He asked, skepticism still lingering. I know it is, I replied. I've done it, but it doesn't happen overnight. First, you get your basics in order. Then you look at ways to grow your money. We're starting with budgeting and saving, but you've got to build from there. Aunt Judy, who had been silent for a while, sighed deeply. I feel like we're just trying to get to the end of a race, but it's never over. We're always making sacrifices and never seeing the payoff. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but I also knew that what she was describing was exactly the mindset that had held her back all these years. It's not about the end of the race, Judy, I said gently. It's about building something that lasts. The payoff doesn't always look like a big check or a shiny reward. It's the peace of mind, the freedom, the security that comes with knowing you've set yourself up for success. The silence hung heavy in the room. I could see the resistance, the doubts they carried, but I also saw the flicker of something else, the desire for change. They didn't understand it yet, but they were starting to realize that this wasn't going to be easy. It was going to require work, and they weren't going to get it right away. But that was the thing about building wealth. It's never about instant gratification. It's about steady progress. And if I could get them to see that, then maybe, just maybe, they could start to see the possibility in their own futures. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, I said, standing up and walking toward the window. But it will be worth it. Stick with me and you'll get there. It's a slow climb, but every step is worth it. And as I looked out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I realized that this wasn't just about helping them anymore. It was about showing myself that I could teach them, guide them through the challenges I had already faced, and help them break through the same barriers that had once held me back. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly in control of my own financial destiny. And maybe, just maybe, theirs too. It had been 2 months since I started guiding my family through the basics of budgeting and saving. The progress had been slow, but steady. Frank had finally managed to cut back on his unnecessary expenses, though I could tell it was still a struggle. Aunt Judy, on the other hand, was more committed than I had expected. She had started to track every penny, even cutting out small luxuries like weekly manicures and her daily coffee shop visits. But the real challenge, I knew, was still ahead of us. The day I knew the tide had truly shifted came unexpectedly. It wasn't in the form of a large deposit or sudden windfall. Instead, it was in Frank's eyes. They were no longer clouded with doubt or frustration. He was excited. We were sitting at my kitchen table one Saturday afternoon when Frank burst in, holding his phone in his hand, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Victoria, I did it," he said, his voice full of energy. "I actually did it. I bought my first stock, real stock, not a penny stock." I couldn't help but smile. This was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. "All right," I said, gesturing for him to sit down. "Tell me everything." Frank sat down quickly, still holding the phone. "Okay, so I was looking at a tech company that's been undervalued for a while. I've been reading up on its financials, its growth potential, and I don't know. I just felt like it was time. I started small, Just a few $100s, but it's a start, right? I nodded, my heart swelling with pride. Absolutely. You've taken the first step into understanding how money can work for you, not just how you can work for money. Aunt Judy, who had been quietly watching from the kitchen counter, wandered over. You really bought stocks? She asked, sounding almost in awe. I thought that was all risky business. It is risky, I replied, giving Frank an encouraging look. But the key is knowledge. It's about doing your research, understanding the market, and knowing when to take calculated risks. The key is to start small. Never put in more than you're willing to lose. And you've already got the first part right. You're learning. You've done your homework. Frank leaned back in his chair, finally looking at ease. It felt really good. It wasn't just a shot in the dark. It felt controlled. Like I was actually doing something, not just hoping for a miracle. Exactly, I said. That's how it should feel. Building wealth isn't about luck. It's about making smart, informed decisions over time. And this is just the beginning. You've taken the first step into learning how to make your money work for you, just like I did. The rest is up to you. But even as I spoke those words, I knew that this was just the start of their journey. The real challenge was staying committed, because just like the budgeting, investing wasn't something that brought instant gratification. It took time, patience, and a willingness to learn from both successes and failures. Aunt Judy, who had been unusually quiet, stepped forward. So Frank, you think we could maybe buy stocks too? I could see the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't one to take risks easily, and the idea of putting her hard-earned money into something that might not pay off was intimidating. But her question was a sign of something important. She was starting to think differently about her finances. For the first time, Aunt Judy was looking at the possibility of using money as a tool, not just a necessity. I think you should, I said, smiling at her. But let's take it step by step. We'll start by researching, like Frank did. And we'll start with low-risk investments first, something safe to get your feet wet. It's all about building confidence and understanding the process. I'm in, she said, her voice soft but determined. I'm willing to give it a shot. I looked at both of them, a sense of accomplishment washing over me. They were finally seeing the possibility in what I had been teaching them all along. It wasn't easy, it wasn't instant, but it was real. Later that night, after they had both left, I sat alone at my kitchen table, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few months. The road hadn't been easy. There had been resistance, frustration, and moments when I thought they would give up. But now, here they were, eager to learn and ready to take their first steps toward financial independence. I knew the journey wasn't over. The next phase would involve more difficult lessons like risk management, investment diversification, and understanding the importance of passive income. But I couldn't help but feel proud. Proud of them for their commitment, and proud of myself for teaching them, for showing them that it was possible to build something better, something lasting. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. I had been afraid of this moment, afraid of showing them that I had made it, afraid of the judgment, the questions, and the doubts that would come with it. But now, with them on the path to financial freedom, I understood that it wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about proving to myself that I had not only achieved success, but that I could help others achieve it too. As I cleaned up from dinner, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. They had made the decision to take control of their financial future. And now, it was my job to guide them. No shortcuts, no easy answers, just steady, deliberate steps forward. And somehow, I knew that this was only the beginning. As the months passed, things began to get real. The excitement of taking those first steps wore off, and reality set in. The financial world wasn't all shiny stocks and easy gains. It was full of challenges, mistakes, and moments of doubt. And as much as I had hoped my family would breeze through the learning curve, I knew that they were about to face some of the same frustrations I had. Frank struggled the most. He had thrown himself into the world of stocks with enthusiasm, but his impatience got the best of him. He wanted quick results. He wanted to see his money grow exponentially. And when things didn't pan out as he expected, he became disheartened. I don't get it, Frank said one evening, throwing his hands up in the air. I thought I knew what I was doing. I researched the company, I made the investment, and now I'm losing money. This feels like a gamble. I could see the frustration in his face, the defeat, but I knew this moment was crucial. He needed to understand that this was part of the process. Frank, this isn't a gamble, I replied calmly. It's a long game. It's not about buying and selling based on short-term fluctuations. You need to look at your investments from a broader perspective. The market goes up and down, but over time, it tends to rise. This is a lesson in patience, not panic. But I could have used that money for other things, he argued. I could have invested in something else. This feels like a loss. Sometimes investing feels like a loss, I said, leaning forward. But the key is knowing when to hold and when to cut your losses. You've learned something valuable here. Next time, you'll make a more informed decision. Aunt Judy, who had been quietly listening from the corner of the room, finally spoke up. I'm not sure I can handle that kind of stress. I mean, I like the idea of growing my money, but I don't want to risk it all on something that could fail. Judy, you're not in this to risk everything, I reassured her. That's why we start with small, manageable investments. You build slowly and you always diversify. If one thing doesn't do well, you've got other things working for you, but it takes time, patience, and most importantly, discipline. Frank sat back, staring at his phone. I guess I just expected it to be easier. And that's the mistake most people make, I said, my voice firm. There's no easy way to success, whether it's financial or personal. It all requires work. You've got to commit even when things don't go your way. The real lesson here is not about the money, it's about how you handle setbacks. If you can stay calm, adjust, and learn from your mistakes, you're on the right path. Frank's shoulders slumped, but a small glimmer of understanding crossed his face. All right, I'll stick with it, but I don't know if I can take many more hits like this. That's the thing, Frank, I said with a hint of a smile. You won't. You'll get better at it, and you'll start to see the returns over time, but it's a process. No one gets rich overnight. And that's when it clicked, for both of them. This wasn't a quick fix solution, it was a journey. The path to financial freedom was filled with setbacks, mistakes, and difficult decisions. But it was all part of the learning process. I had to help them embrace the fact that it wouldn't be easy. But that didn't mean it wasn't worth it. Aunt Judy was the next to hit a roadblock. After months of cautiously investing small amounts, she found herself staring at a series of disappointing returns. The low-risk, low-reward investments she had been making weren't giving her the excitement she'd hoped for. She wanted to feel like she was accomplishing something more. I don't know, Victoria, Aunt Judy said one evening, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose as she looked over her portfolio. These small, safe investments aren't cutting it. I don't feel like I'm getting ahead. I want to do more, get some better returns, but I'm afraid to take risks. I sat beside her, looking at the numbers on her screen. You're exactly where I was at your stage, Judy. It's natural to feel like this. But remember, we started with the safe investments because you needed to learn the fundamentals. But now, it's time to take the next step. She hesitated, glancing at the screen. You mean, start taking more risks? Yes, I replied, but not recklessly. It's about calculated risks. At this point, you have a foundation, you understand how investments work, and you're starting to feel more confident. It's time to take a few more chances. Just make sure they're well researched and that you're prepared to lose a little if things don't go as planned. I've never liked gambling, she muttered, clearly nervous about the idea of venturing further into the world of high-risk investments. Investing isn't gambling if you know what you're doing, I reassured her. Look, I've been where you are, and I can tell you right now, the only way to grow is to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. But you need to diversify. That means a mix of both safe and higher risk investments. It's about balancing. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was reluctant, but also curious. All right, I'll try, but you'll have to help me pick something. I don't want to lose everything I've worked for. Let's start small, I suggested, pulling up a few stocks and mutual funds I had been watching recently. I'll guide you through this. We'll make sure you're well prepared before diving in. She nodded slowly. I'll trust you, Victoria, but I'm still nervous. That's the first sign of growth, I said with a smile. It's good to be nervous. It means you care about making the right decisions. A few weeks later, I received a text from Aunt Judy that made my heart race. She had taken a calculated risk, investing in a new tech company that had recently announced an innovative product that seemed poised to disrupt the market. I had helped her evaluate the potential. And while the investment was still risky, I had seen enough promise to give her the green light. The message was short, but it packed a punch. It's paying off. The stock's up 25% already. I couldn't contain my excitement as I texted back. That's amazing, Judy. See? You took the leap and it paid off. Keep watching it, but don't forget to diversify more. Aunt Judy called me right away, her voice full of excitement. I can't believe it. It actually worked. You did the work, Judy, I said, my voice calm and proud. This is just the beginning. Now that you know what it feels like to have a win, remember that you still need to stay grounded. Don't get too attached to any one stock. Diversify and keep learning. Aunt Judy laughed, the weight that had been hanging over her for months finally lifting. I think I'm starting to get it now. I just had to believe it was possible. And with that, I knew we had reached a turning point. My family was no longer just following my advice. They were taking it and running with it. They were starting to think like investors, not just consumers. A year had passed since I had first sat down with Frank and Aunt Judy. Their transformation had been nothing short of remarkable. They had learned the value of patience, the importance of diversification, and the power of smart, informed decisions. They had come a long way from the skepticism they once had about financial independence. One evening, we sat together at my apartment, celebrating with a simple dinner. Frank was now investing confidently, and Aunt Judy was researching new opportunities with enthusiasm. They were both in better financial positions than they had been before, and they had me to thank. I never thought I'd say this, Frank began, his voice light but sincere. But I'm glad you dragged us into this, Victoria. You really changed the way I see money. It's not about getting rich quick. It's about being smart with what you have. Aunt Judy nodded. I never thought I could do this, but now I see that it's just about making the right moves. I'm actually looking forward to seeing how much I can grow my portfolio. I smiled, a sense of fulfillment washing over me. You both did the hard work. I just showed you the way. But in that moment, I realized that this journey had been about more than just teaching them. It had been about proving to myself that I could do more than just succeed. I could help others succeed too. And that in itself was worth more than any financial success I could have imagined. As we clinked glasses, I felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that, for once, my family saw me not just as the person who could succeed, but as the person who helped them succeed. And that was the true wealth I had always been after.